I'm here with Brian Kim, composer, and his newest work is Jentry Chau versus the Underworld for Netflix. How are you today?
I'm doing great, James. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So I actually have a ton of questions for you, and you've probably been
Okay.
asked these questions 100 times.
Never get tired of it. Let's do it.
Okay, so what's the difference between writing music for live action, because you've done How I Met Your Mother and the 90210
Mhm.
reboot, and you've done animation too. So what's the difference? How do you do it?
I think for especially Gentry and a little bit for Star versus the Forces of Evil, my older Disney show, um, whenever there's songwriting duties involved in the shows, as was for both of them, I have to start before any animation even begins. And so for Gentry, I was just writing songs just to scripts with no visual indicators of any kind except for the words on the page.
Not even
And then I
storyboards?
for Gentry, no. There were some for Star. Star was a storyboard based show, but Gentry was a script based show. And so whenever they needed a song for an episode, they would just send me the script and they would say, "Look at pages X through Y. It's going to be for this scene," and just read the scene and sort of and just write a song that's based on what you would think would work there. And so I would write a song just to the script. I would record my vocal as the demo. And then Echo Wu, the showrunner, would review it and give me some notes, and we go back and forth. And then once it was approved, that would go off to the animators, and then they would animate to it. And then I wouldn't hear or think about it for another, 9, 10 months, however long it took them to animate the episode. And then once animation was finished, I would get it back, and then I would do some tweaks to it because certain timings would change. The hook might not land where I wanted to land. The verse might be too long. The pre-chorus might be too short. And then I would just have to nudge things along. And then that would then get approved to picture. And then I wouldn't think about it again for another couple of months until we have to record the artists. And then we would book an artist. And when I wrote the songs, I didn't know who would be singing the songs on the show. And so I would eventually have to tweak the song to be what the artist would need it to be. If it's a rapper versus a singer, I would tweak it to be more of a rap song. If it's a crooner or a more loud singer, I would tweak it towards what they need it to be. So those were very specific processes to Gentry Chau in particular, and for a few episodes of Star as well. And so for me, that's a big difference just in terms of how long I'm going to be working on a piece of music. So for Gentry, I might have written a song 2.5 years ago that wouldn't get finished until much later down the line just because of the process. Now, for like 90210, for example, How I Met Your Mother, I was an assistant on that show. And then for features as well, I'm the last person to come in. For spoiler alert, for Hello, My Name is Doris, there weren't any songs on those features that I did with Michael Showalter. And so he would go off and film the movie, edit it. It would be almost locked, and then I would come in at the very end of the process. And so I'm working on something that has already been through a lot of other stages so far, and I'm just like one of the last people to come in, which gives the filmmakers a different perspective on the movie or the film or the TV show because they've already been through a lot of storytelling processes during it. With Gentry, I was part of that storytelling process from the very beginning, and so I really felt a lot of involvement in that stage of the process, more so than on anything else I've done.
Now, so when you're writing something for the script, how do you set the tone? Like if there's a scene and it has to be a certain tone, how do you go, okay, yeah, I'm thinking it should be this. I mean, and then, I mean, of course, the director could come back and go, nope, that's not what I'm looking for.
Right. Yeah. Netflix and Echo and the show directors gave me a lot of freedom. They really were just like, take a swing and see what it's going to be, and then we'll sort of work at it from there. Because they also were coming up with the concepts for the episodes at the same time. So none of us had a final version of what we thought each episode was going to be while I was writing songs for it. And so a good example is in an episode of Gentry, it takes place at the Alamo. The whole show takes place in Texas, and one of the episodes takes place at the Alamo. And so they had a sequence in there where they thought, this horror zombie sequence might be really fun if it were done to a Korean hip hop cover of Johnny Cash's Remember the Alamo, which is a very specific sentence to hear in a
Yes.
meeting, you know? And so I'm like, okay, that is an interesting phrase. Let's see what comes out of that. And for that, there's no template for that. There's no example for them to be like, oh, look at this thing that another show did. Please do this thing that that show did, but just do it for our show. It was very much like, this is your blank canvas to do. And so I had some descriptions of what the zombies looked like in the script, and I knew it was going to be at the Alamo, and so there was going to be certain backdrops that were going to be there, of historical settings. And so I just took pieces of that as various pieces of information. And so to honor the Western settings, I used some nylon guitar and some spaghetti Western trumpet in the track. And then to honor sort of the Korean hip hop vibe, I put in certain kind of synths and certain kind of mixing on the bass and the certain kind of mixing on the drums. And then I translated the whole song into Korean, which gives it a very different vibe. Korean is a very percussive language. That's why it works really well with pop and hip hop. And so it just gave the cadence of the lyrics a different feeling. It almost made it feel like a march. And so then I put in, based on the Korean lyrics influence, I put in sort of a march beat behind all of this stuff. And so you have a little bit of Western stuff, a little bit of hip hop stuff, and then some march stuff underneath all these Korean lyrics. And it was honestly, it was the first new song I wrote for the show after getting hired for it. And I just thought, I hope they like this. I don't really have much else to go on at this point. And I sent them the demo, and everybody was like, okay, yes, let's go. This is the sort of thing that we want to do. And so it was a good case study in the sense that I could take little bits and pieces of information from the script and put them together in a pot, and the show was going to give me the freedom to cook whatever I wanted to cook out of it.
I just saw a show where someone took a song from Les Miserables, one of
Hmm.
Jean Valjean's songs, and did it in the style of Johnny Cash.
Oh, that's fun.
And it was like, okay, this is just completely weird. So I really want to hear yours now.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I hope you like it. In the studio, it was really wild because I knew my Korean wasn't like, so I learned Korean as an adult, right? And so I learned it from textbooks and from teachers, and I didn't grow up speaking the language in my house. And so there are certain idiosyncrasies about it that I didn't really get from speaking it every day. And so when I got into the studio to record the song with a rapper named Rex Dizzy, who is also an actor who was in Beef, a lot of people are going to recognize him from that. He was just like, we got to change some of these. We got to make these a little bit more like authentically casual, basically. Because I think a lot of what I did was like very strict. He was like, no, 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 we gotta do this, we gotta do this, we gotta do this. And so seeing something go through that evolution in that way, I'm sure that when they were doing that Les Mis to Johnny Cash version of it, there were certain phrases that they had to tweak in a certain way to make it fit the lilt and the rhythm. And so, yeah, seeing these songs go through that evolution in real time is really cool.
So how long have you been working on Gentry?
Almost 3 years. I
Wow.
started first quarter of 2022. So by the time it comes out at the end of 2024, almost 3 years, not quite 3 years.
So how long has your music been done though?
Oh, geez. I just did a change on a mix last week.
Oh, okay. So you're still
Yeah.
working on it.
Yeah, there was one of the really great processes of the show was working with 13 different recording artists for the soundtrack. There's 12 songs. One of the songs has two singers on it, so 13 vocalists. Actually, no, Cat's Eye has six vocalists, so even more than that. And so it was a really cool experience to have these songs that I had been living with for a couple of years, and then to hand them over to these artists who are going to bring their own voice to it. And so that process has been a little bit ongoing for the album because we had versions that went in the show, but then when we do things for the album, the songs are a little bit longer, they're a little bit more fleshed out. There are verses that I take out for the show versions because there's dialogue and I don't want it to conflict. And so we've been making some of those tweaks because the album isn't out yet. The album's coming out when the show comes out on December 5th. And so for the streaming version of the album, we made some additional tweaks. Yeah, it's ongoing. It's been this incredible process. I don't know what it's going to be like when I can't work it on anymore, James. Like, I don't even know. It's going to be so weird to like not have these on my hard drive waiting to be tweaked again,
You're gonna wake up in the morning and go, "Oh, I've got an idea," and
Oh, I
then
know. Oh, I should have done this. Oh, can I change it on Spotify now? Who do I call?
well, you could put out the Brian Kim version. You
Oh,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. The B-sides. Yeah,
yeah,
I can make my own B-sides album. That is a good plan. I like that.
yeah. But I mean, It'll take over your life though, because you'll spend the rest of your life going, I want to tweak it just a little more.
I know it's going to be this ongoing magnum opus until I'm in my retirement age.
Right? Your kids are going to be
Oh
working on
God,
the songs.
I don't want to put them through that. These are daddies.
So, how did you get into composing? I mean, when at what point in your life did you go? Because I'm a huge music fan.
Mhm.
I love music. I mean, hell, I all I listen to in my car are soundtracks, which
Mhm.
I mean, that's
I
me.
get it. I get it.
And I have no musical talent whatsoever.
Mm.
I mean, how
I'm sure
did
you
you?
have some. Everybody
Well,
has some.
yeah. I mean,
There
I can sing. I can keep a
you
note.
go.
So there,
That's something.
but I can't play
Um,
an instrument.
Right. So I grew up in a very my parents were immigrants, and so they had a very specific idea of what it would be to get an education, be successful. And so when I was growing up, I was playing piano ever since I was in kindergarten, but it was never really a viable career path. It was always, this is a hobby, this is something you can be good at and enjoy, but this is not what's gonna, keep you going throughout your whole life. And
Right.
so I initially went to college to be a doctor. My parents were both in medicine. My dad was a doctor. My mom was a nurse. It was just something that seemed like a lot of sense to do. And so when I went to college, I started pre-med. I was taking a lot of music classes on the side. Bye, kitty. Um, and, um, and after 1 year of pre-med, I couldn't take it. I did not like it. I was deeply sad for the first time in my life, really, about just what I was doing and what I was studying. And so I took a couple of winding paths and then eventually just realized that all of my waking hours, all I wanted to do was music. I just wanted to sing in choirs and direct musical theater and write songs and just and be doing this, playing piano. And so I eventually graduated with a degree in music, and then still just all of that, my whole life of being told that it was not a viable career option, that had really, really planted itself deep. And so I was a teacher after college. I taught for a couple of years and loved it. I loved teaching. I was teaching at a great school in Washington, D.C., that I still keep in touch with all the faculty members as friends. And so it was not a direct path to the composing. After a couple of years of teaching, I realized that I wanted to execute the thing that I was teaching. And so I applied to the USC program, the film scoring program at USC. I went there in 2007 to 2008. Really felt like I had found where I was supposed to be, and immediately jumped from that into assisting other composers, orchestrating for other composers, being a studio tech, just being a fly on the wall. I just wanted to be here. Whatever it was going to take for me to be here, I was going to
Right.
do. I've probably worked for a dozen different composers at various points. People at Remote Control and Hans Zimmer's Outfit, John Swihart, the composer for How I Met Your Mother. I worked for him for a number of years. Chris Leonard's, Chris Beck, so many composers who were working on huge projects. I was just like right there in the corner, just trying to give them a hand. And then eventually, I booked Star versus the Forces of Evil. That was my first solo credit. Disney held a blind audition for it. So I had just gotten an agent, and so they just said, I have this for you if you want to take a swing at it. And then I got it, and then I've been very blessed in that the sense I've been working ever since. I've never really gotten to take too much of a break. And yeah, it wasn't a straight line. When I was in USC, there were a lot of people there I was with who were saying that this was their dream ever since they'd first watched the ET when they were children, and that wasn't me. And I think I'm very grateful for the path that I took because it gave me a lot of different perspectives. I've played a lot of different kinds of music, and even seen what a life would be not doing music as a living. And so, yeah, every day I'm just like super grateful, even though it took me a little while to get here.
Now, you said you've played a lot of different types of music. What is your favorite type of music? I mean, what do
You
you
know,
listen to when you want to relax?
that's a good question. I very often will gravitate towards female, highly produced pop. There's something about it that just like ticks all the buttons in the pleasure centers of my brain. Like when Ariana Grande's Eternal Sunshine album came out, I didn't listen to anything else for like months. Like
What's
other
funny
things
is I
I
was going to say, so you listen to Ariana Grande, and
Oh my God, just like she is, there's no comparison. Very excited for Wicked. Haven't seen it yet. Have heard the tracks though. Very, very cool. But yeah, she is like the queen. There's no Ariana Grande slander in this house. She is untouchable. Um, So like that sort of thing is what I'll go. I think there's something about it that it's just like something about the female voice in that context. I myself, I cannot create that on my own. In my studio, it is a physical impossibility for me to make something like that. So there's something really interesting about listening to something that I know is out of reach for me, and then I can just enjoy it for what it is. You know, I think a lot of film score stuff, I write a lot of electronic music for what I do. When I'm listening to stuff that is within my reach, I'm always trying to kind of pick it apart and just see like, oh, they probably did this to get this. What can I do to incorporate that kind of sound in my work? And so when I listen to stuff for pleasure, I'm listening to stuff that is beyond me, and that makes me happy.
So I was fortunate enough to see Wicked on Broadway with the original cast.
Oh my, okay,
And so I'm excited about the movie
yeah,
because I mean, Ariana Grande is perfect as Glinda. She
oh my
really
goodness.
is.
And I think a lot of people don't know what a musical theater nerd she is, you know? Like one of my favorite theater composers is Jason Robert Brown. And they, over COVID, collaborated on a couple of remote performances where she would sing songs from her musicals. And I was just like, who got into my brain and figured out that this was exactly what I needed right now, you know? Um, and you know, I was listening to a lot of her songs while I was writing the songs for Gentry as well. And so I think for people, there's one song in particular that if you're like a really close listener, you might be like, this is an Ariana song a little bit. I'm just like, it was deep in my soul and the scene worked really well for it. And I just really wanted to have that like really clean pop R&B vibe. And so there's one in there that for me was just like, this is my like wave to Ariana Grande and just saying hi in the Gentry soundtrack, you know?
So would you ever write something for the stage?
Um, I would. I think I would. That was where I spent a lot of time in college in particular. Both as a performer, less successfully so as a performer, more successfully so as a music director and like the orchestra conductor and that sort of thing. Um, I love how on musical theater the incidental music and the songs all kind of come from the same place, and they're this really unified storytelling unit. Les Mis that you brought up is a great is a great example of that. um I really, and to a similar extent, I love how old Disney movies were kind of shaped in that way too, when you had the composer and the songwriter being the same person, like old Alan Menken and new Alan Menken Disney movies. I love how all of that fits together. I also look at the show Euphoria a little bit in that way, and the composer Labyrinth also produces the songs, also writes the score, works with Zendaya to sing on the songs as well. And I just think that's like a really special alchemy when that happens. Um, and so like when I saw God, what was like a really good musical theater experience? Wicked is a wonderful one. Stephen Schwartz is really, really great at being a complete creative presence. You know, when you're watching a Stephen Schwartz musical, you know you're watching a Stephen Schwartz musical and you can feel his influence every page, every lyric, every note. And so that was really what I looked at the Gentry process as. That almost felt like it for me. And it really made me want to do it on the stage as well. But that's what it felt like working for Gentry, and that like the score and the songs were one thing. They can't exist without each other. Um, I have a couple of musical ideas that I have been sitting on over the past couple of years that I thought if I ever got the time, I would try to do that. I'm still thinking about them. I still have notes on them. I still write demos for them every now and then. And so maybe in 10, 15 years, we can come back to this conversation and we can see where I talked about it. Over COVID as well, I had a little free time. And so I wrote a piano album that is just on Spotify, on Apple Music. It was just something that I wanted to write. It wasn't for a studio, it wasn't for a project. It was just something that I just booked a day at Capitol and recorded. And there are a couple of songs on there that are very much of the kind of Jason Robert Brown, Adam Gettle musical theater style, like piano, art song, theater kind of hybrid. And so that also is me kind of getting my feet wet a little bit and being like, what is it writing songs in this context with this kind of singer involved? You know, writing for rappers, pop artists, for Gentry versus writing for a classically theater trained mezzo soprano who has a certain belt range here and a certain head voice range here, but like really likes to sit in like this kind of money range in the middle. Completely different muscles in your brain, and something that I would really like to explore again.
Do you ever, work on a project and go, wait a second, I've got a song I wrote like 10 years ago, and this
Oh,
would work perfectly?
I wouldn't say it's like a full song. I do come up with little instrumental bits or like a synth patch or just a groove that really worked well for something that I really hope I get to use again. Probably because like it didn't survive in the project. There are actually some songs for Gentry that I think I'm going to turn into other things later. Songs that didn't make it into the final project. There are a dozen songs on the album, but I think I wrote 16, 17, 18 songs, depending on what you consider a full concept of a song. And so there are some of those that I really liked and that the show really liked. They just didn't fit when we got the final picture. And so even for that, I really hope over the next year or two I get some time to finish those because there were some singers that I'd already booked to work on them and they want to work on them too. And so Gentry's a good example of that, actually, where I have these songs where I'm just like, if I could just finish these someday, I'd be really happy to put them out. And so hopefully this will be on the B-sides, maybe, as we mentioned earlier.
Or
It's
there
a
could be a second season, right? Is that a
if there
possibility?
this, I would really love it. I mean, it's so hard to tell with these shows whether they're going to get a second season. If we get a second season, heck yeah, they are going to go in there. I'm going to find a way to get them in there because I really like them. But if we, knock on wood, if the cars don't fall the way they're going to fall, then maybe I'll use them somewhere else. But let's assume we get a second season now. Let's assume
Let's
that.
assume. So yeah,
Like
we'll
that.
be hearing those other songs somewhere
Yeah.
down the line.
Let's manifest that. Second season. That's where they're going to go.
Second
Yeah.
season, right. Now, have you ever had a song that you completely loved that you thought was perfect for a scene or perfect for something, and the
Mhm.
director came back and went, "Nope, I don't like it. It's crap."
Um, gosh, let me see. Um,
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
no, I love this question though. This is really good. Okay, this is very random. This is a very random answer to this question. A
Okay.
friend of mine, another musical theater nerd who I met in college, who's also a writer. She was a writer on Modern Family. She got an opportunity to write a musical for a product launch at the Consumer Electronics Show for Google. And we thought it would be a great idea to just do a full, like, 3-act musical within 9 minutes, basically, about the product and about this whole plot line about the product. And we like went to town. We made it a full theater extravaganza in 9 minutes. We're like, it's Google. Google will have the money to do this.
Right.
They'll just put it up in the Consumer Electronics Show. It's no big deal. And they were like, nah, no, 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 no. And like every now and then I'll get a text from her just being like, "Do you remember when we did that thing and Google was really, really dumb and didn't use it?" It's like, yeah, and then I'll go and listen to it and it'll make me happy. It makes me happy. It makes her happy. And I'm glad that it exists for that. But that was one where we we had a feeling that we were doing something very weird and very risky, but we just enjoyed it. And Google didn't take it. That's okay. I'm sure their product launch was a success, but we have it now for ourselves. That's for
Yes,
us.
you do. It's
Yeah.
it's it's like a guilty pleasure. Go back
Yes.
and
Yeah.
listen to it whenever you want.
Yeah. And yeah, we both sing on it. And so it's this nice little fruition of this relationship that we started in college 20 odd years ago. And now we have this thing that came out of that whole ordeal.
Now, going back to talking about animation and live action,
Mhm.
which do you prefer writing for?
You know, I would love it if I could always do both. I think there's something so different about something like Gentry getting something with a really heightened color palette with very certain exaggerated actions or motions that are just not possible in real life, that is very inspiring for a very unique palette and for very heightened action. I think there are certain ways that I can score an animated action sequence that I can't necessarily score a live action sequence just because physically the characters are capable of doing different things in an animated sequence. For example, there is a sequence in Gentry midway through the season where she kind of levels up in a way. She has flames coming out of her. She's floating. She's doing levels of her power that she hasn't done before. You see it in the trailer, so I'm not really giving a spoiler, but it's there. And there was when I see stuff like that, I'm always really inspired by anime and Hayao Miyazaki soundtracks and the way that they treat those kind of heightened, exaggerated moments. And so I would say the score there goes pretty big, pretty over the top. That I think if you did that over a live action sequence, I think it would feel out of place, you know? I look at the Avatar live action versus the Avatar animation. Those two things were treated very differently with different composers, and I think that's also a very good example of what I'm talking about. Whereas something like Spoiler Alert that I did in 2022 is a very focused, deliberate character drama. In addition to being a rom-com at its heart, but it's it's a very sad story about a married couple. One of them gets cancer and eventually passes away at the end of the movie. It's a true story about the TV journalist Michael Ausiello and his partner Kit. And so that was a movie where the name of the game was restraint, where even if I felt like emotionally inside, I was feeling very, very big emotions while I was watching it. If I translated too big onto the screen, it would take away from what was happening on the screen. It would distract from it in a way, and it would make it seem a little saccharine, a little cheap. And so a lot of the biggest moments in that movie I would feel like the emotions were really, really big on the screen. But for me, the best thing is to stand back a little bit and really let the actors sing and do what they're there to do. And so maybe at some point along the way, I will get to do a live action film that has really exaggerated Scott Pilgrim type of action in it, and then I could sort of meld the two, or vice versa. I will get to do an animated project that is very, very serious and very hushed and character driven. These things exist. For me, they haven't come my way yet, and so for I have these kind of two separate lanes as it currently exists that I really enjoy in different ways.
Now, since you did bring this up, I'm going to ask if there's an existing franchise that you would like to write for, what
Okay.
would it be? Your
Okay.
what your dream? I mean, we're talking Marvel, Star Trek, Star Wars, Harry Potter, because it's kind of
I
packed.
I'm a Star Wars kid
Okay.
at heart. I was one that had a lot of the books in addition to memorizing all of the movies. So Timothy Zahn books, Kevin Anderson books, these things were like sacred objects in my room as I was growing up. And so for me, if I had the opportunity to work on a Star Wars project, oh man, I don't even know. And I didn't even think because my style generally is not that kind of big Wagner-esque orchestra thing. That's
Hmm.
generally not what I have been doing in my career so far. I have training for it. I love doing it. I have examples of stuff that I've written in that style. But when I do that, I'm always like, this is not necessarily me. This is not what I feel like is who I am. Whereas I really like blending the orchestral and the song production world. Like for me, that's really what gets me off artistically, musically. You can hear it a little bit in my spoiler alert score. There's a lot of like ambient electronics that I built into the orchestra for that score. So when I saw Andor, the Star Wars series Andor, and heard what Nicholas Brittle was doing with that score, and he was blending his electronic side with his orchestral side, and he made something that still felt like it was in the Star Wars universe, but it still very much felt like him because he also was great with song production. We've all heard the Succession theme. We know what that sounds like. And so something if Star Wars had another thing like that where it was this hybrid score, which is kind of where I live, I think yeah, that would really be a cherry on top of a career that I've really enjoyed so far. Of
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today.
course, thank you. I really enjoyed talking with you.
It's been great. I hope to one day actually meet you. You never know.
Hmm. Never know with these things. Never know. Where do you live?
I live in Ohio, but I travel all over the country. So
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
in Comic
Never
Con
know.
in New York. I'm in Chicago. I'm everywhere. So
Love it. Love it.
love it. Well, again, I want to thank you. I want everybody to check out Gentry Chow premiering on December 5th.
Mhm.
I'm James, and I've been here with Brian Kim. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you. I really
Great
appreciate
day and happy holiday.
it. You too. You too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.